Welcome to Capped Off. This is Mike. Today we're going to tackle the question, what is Agile? Before we talk about what Agile means, I want to talk about what it typically looks like, because many of you who are maybe watching this video are really just wanting to know, tell me, hey, what does this mean for me? I'm told I'm going to be Agile. So I'll do it brief. So briefly, it's, if you think about maybe historically you've delivered things in like maybe large chunks to your customers, to your market. You do it all in sort of one big batch, trying to get it all in. Do you think about more of a model where you're doing things in smaller chunks that are adding incremental value to your customers? Not having them wait for a year or 18 months to get that value. You're trying to get that delivery faster and more frequently to your customers. So with this, right, you're doing this for two reasons. One, there's economic reasons for it. Your cash flow is better. You're also testing the market. You're getting reduction in risks, business risk, technical risk by doing this frequent delivery to your customers. But importantly, you're also better understanding where the product needs to be as your customers are actually engaged in using the product and you're incrementally building it up. If things that you maybe made a mistake on, you got wrong, well, you have opportunities to adjust and maybe take that product in the direction that it needs to go to better serve your customers and your business. Now, another thing that you'll see with Agile are more cross-functional teams. So cross-functional teams that are focused on delivering value with a focus on a value stream. Now, when I say cross-functional, this means, different skill sets, the different activities, and maybe in your organization you have different functional areas who do different things. Maybe you have a design team, maybe you have an engineering team, maybe you have a quality team. So rather than thinking about those activities being brought to bear and doing their activities and planning those things, you're looking at a value stream delivering the product in increments of done product with all those cross-functional skills together to deliver value. Now, this can be a major change for some groups where, for some organizations where those roles have taken themselves out of context of that value stream and almost become focused more on their activity as an end in its own right versus the delivery of the product and value to customers. So this will be a big change. Now, another area of change that you'll start to see is, higher degrees of transparency. More visibility into what's happening with the rate at which work is being delivered, the quality of product being delivered. These things and the transparency and visibility into these things goes way up. Now, this can be very unsettling for some people and some organizations where maybe historically they're not used to providing that level of transparency. And also in some companies where if it looks like what you're surfacing up with that transparency looks like it's unpredictable or unreliable in some ways that you are maybe perhaps doing something wrong as a leader or manager in your company. And this is one that often gets teams and companies messed up, is this holding on to this sense of control and expected unattended production of delivery of product and services. So that's a big change that you're looking at when you're looking at Agile. Now, the last thing that I'd say of what to expect with Agile are looking at a lot of language, a lot of the ways of working from the world of Scrum. Scrum has become the dominant language and approach, framework, I should say, that organizations and teams look at when they look at the ways of working, the roles, the rules for working when they're working Agile. Now let's get into what Agile actually is. So, as it turns out, Agile isn't a bunch of rules. It isn't the framework. It's not Scrum. It is actually it is a set of values and principles. Now, this is not unusual in the world. The Lean is a principle-based system. The Toyota Way is a principle-based system. Total Quality Management is a principle-based system. There are many examples out there of principle-based systems that inform how teams work, and really it informs how they make decisions and directionally what is motivating and driving them in that decision making. Now, people often struggle to describe what Agile means, and this is actually not unusual. As I just mentioned, Agile is principle and value based, and as it turns out, trying to describe values is very difficult. In fact, it's nearly impossible. I'm going to do a quick little exercise here with you where we can maybe explore that quickly. So I'm going to ask you a question. and I already know what your answer is going to be. Here's my question to you. Do you value trust? Now, if you're like most of the people I've ever met, you're going to be nodding your head like, yeah, of course I value trust. Who doesn't? I'm going to say, that's awesome. I'm glad we all agree to this. Now I'm going to ask you to draw me a picture of trust. Take a few seconds, pause the video, and come back. Now that you're back, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at it and tell me, did you draw maybe a picture of a guy falling backwards into somebody else's hands? That's one I've seen. Others that I've seen are, a parent holding a child's hand. I've seen pictures of cars. I've seen pictures of boats, people with dogs, cats on a leash. Now, these are all examples of what we interpret trust to be. Because as it turns out, values are a very human thing. They're actually something that we interpret. They're not an objective thing in the world. And so this is where it gets really kind of tricky when we start talking about Agile. When you ask people this question, you get a lot of hand waving and a lot of uncertainty about what it is. Sometimes you'll get answers that'll tell you, oh, it's all of these practices and methodologies. And there's a relationship between those practices and methodologies, but they're not the same thing. Some people will, make it feel much more mysterious than it needs to be as well. Because really, principles and values aren't that mysterious. We just have to understand what they are and where you need to start with the principles and values. And really, that starts with people is where you need to start. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but understand that this is what it is. It's principles and values. Now, with the example of trust, the one I just talked about, let's unpack a few of those examples I talked about. For instance, the fellow falling backwards. Now, you may look at this and say, well, that's obviously trust. It's the trust fall. But really, that's your interpretation. You're reading that into that instance. For all you know, this person fell backwards, and the person trying to catch them just doesn't want to get hurt, but this person is about to collide with them. Now, again, this is an interpretation. It's what we view. It's how we would interpret trust, but we still can't describe it precisely as that. We have to describe it with interactions, normative rules about how we behave together, and as a group, or how people actually interact together. So values and principles, they're hard to communicate, but they're easier to integrate if you inject them into conversation with you and your team. And we'll talk about an approach to doing that in just a little bit. Now, I'm going to go through the first 4 value statements in the Agile Manifesto. Now, I'm not going to do a deep dive on these, but I just want to read through them quickly to understand the mindset and the value shift, or the mindset shift that you're trying to achieve with teams and your organization. Now, it's positioned as 4 value statements that talk about we value this over something else. So there's a left and a right side to each value statement. And it starts with the things on the left. So the first thing I'm going to say is more important than the things on the right, which is the second thing I'm going to mention. Now, when I say left and right, this is in reference to the Agile Manifesto, which is published on agilemanifesto.org. And you can see that, the statement is broken up on the left and the right. Now, the final part of this statement, though, final part of that statement is that although the things on the left are more important, there's still value to these things on the right. So you don't want to dismiss them or forget them. So the first one, let's go with this, right? So the first one is we value individuals and interactions over process and tools. So here's one where we're talking about the people. The people and the ways that we work together are more important than the rules of work, the roles, artifacts, process flow, as well as tools. The next one, working software over comprehensive documentation. Now, this is saying that the product that we're building, and by the way, if you're not building software, imagine working product, working system, working service, whatever it is you're doing, over comprehensive documentation. Now, this is looking at, and incidentally, this is a bit of a slice in time because the Agile Manifesto was written in 2001 when there was a lot of high ceremony process out there where it was becoming almost as if the process meant more than the product itself, and people were spending more time concerned with where they were at with the process versus building high quality product for your customer. So again, it's working software though. Our working product is more important than the comprehensive documentation. The next one, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This is about a relationship. right? So are we going to be in a transactional relationship with a customer, or do we want to work together so that we're both able to build the best thing possible? We can build the best product for our customers, and our customers get the best product they can possibly get. We want to be collaborating with our customers versus contract negotiation with our customers. The final one is responding to change over following a plan. So this is looking at things, and it's really just acknowledging the fact that in the world of new product development, or if you're building anything new, by default, you don't know exactly what you're building. You can imagine it, you can say, oh yes, we've written everything down, but if you are building this for the first time, I guarantee you cannot precisely define it, because if you could, that means you've probably done it before. And if you're building it again, that's crazy. So what you're engaged in is in a world of product development or building something new. You're understanding that I'm going to hit a lot of variability. A lot of the things I thought I was going to do, you're not actually going to do. A lot of the things I thought were going to be easy aren't going to be easy. Some things I thought were going to be hard aren't going to be hard either. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so we want ways that are more responsive to change in the variables around us versus having a hardened plan that builds a sense of confidence, but in fact has no bearing in reality at all. Now, with this, there's still value to the items on the right, as I mentioned, right? So although it's people and the way they work together is the most important thing, individuals and interactions, people still need a process. They still need rules. They need to know how to work together. They still need tools that enable them. So these things are still relevant to teams. Working product over comprehensive documentation. Now, this documentation, keep in mind, when I talk about documentation, I'm thinking more around this is actually in reference more to the intermediary work products. So things you do along the way as you're building a product versus the documentation that goes with a product. So I don't want you to confuse documentation like a manual that belongs with a car as, excessive documentation. And that is actually part of product. When I talk about documentation, I'm talking about the design artifacts that maybe you created, right, to define what you thought you were going to build. Now, if it kind of resembles it a little bit, I mean, there's some value there, but you don't want to overinvest in something that is going to inform, a direction you're going to go in, but not precisely what it is you're building. Once you've built it, then you want to invest time in documenting what you built, right? So keep this in mind. So you still need some documentation, and you still have to write things down. It's not okay not to write anything down, but you want to be measuring the amount of effort and time you're putting into it. Next is, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Again, we're wanting a relationship, right? Working together with our customers, but we also we need to have an understanding, right? We still have to give information to our customers about how much is it going to take, or how much is this going to cost, how long is it going to take to deliver this. So it's not an excuse to give no information. Your data is going to get better, right, as you work through and you're starting to tackle risks, and as a team you're getting a better sense at the rate at which you're getting through work. But there's never an excuse not to give any information on how long things are going to take. Sometimes you may have no idea, and that's okay. I should be careful here. But in general, over time, we want to be providing as good a forecast as possible, right, within a confidence range that we feel comfortable with, so that our customers know and we're comfortable with what we're talking about for delivery. Finally, although we want to be responsive to change, we still need to be planning. And that planning out, right, as you're looking out, your horizon may vary. And this will depend on the volatility of what you're building, the volatility of your market. But you need to be doing some measure of planning, and the fidelity of it goes down the further you move into that horizon. So here, these are the 4 value statements. Now, as I mentioned earlier about integrating these in, what I'll start to do initially as a team, and maybe you start this with your team when you're just starting your Agile journey, is to actually talk about these 4 value statements. And rather than asking what they mean objectively, ask about how you're going to change to reflect these values, or the weighted values. Because if you look at it, each of these statements says we value, for instance, individuals over interactions over process and tools. Now, asking the question, where are we in this weighting, but how do we move ourselves closer to individuals and interactions over the process and tools, for instance? So asking about what does it look like here? What could it look like here? What are the things that we could do internally with our group or our team or organization that starts to move us directionally towards that left side of the value statements. And this gets people talking and starting to build a new normative sense, or normative understanding, I should say, of what the Agile Manifesto means. And then you can make it tangible, real, and practical for you and your group. This is where the examples start to become what Agile means for you and your team. Final one, sometimes you'll hear people talk about, oh, I'm little a Agile, or I'm big A Agile, or I don't know, some middle A Agile. And sometimes I get asked, what's the difference, Mike? And to be honest, there's not much difference. It really tends to be people who are struggling with this ability to communicate values and principles, which is normal. You can't really objectively define it. You can only describe it in instances, and within a dynamic of a group is the only place it makes sense. So it's hard, right? So sometimes people get into discussions about, oh, I'm little a, I'm big A. It's also not you want to be careful here, because sometimes it can feel very mysterious or a slightly Gnostic exercise to be talking about Agile and what it means. It isn't really. It's principles and values that are meaningful when people are engaged together building product, and doing it in a way that is focused on value, focused on delivering quickly, frequently to our customers, creating environments that are joyful to work in and are highly productive, where teams are focused on getting better every single day and enjoying working together and becoming better together. And I say better and not better, it's about become better at delivering more reliably, high quality done increments. So what I'd say is, don't get caught up in those discussions. Understand it's a set of values and principles. You do need to look at frameworks and approaches, methodologies, things like Scrum, right? This is a great place to start, is Scrum. As when you talk about process and tools, right, for teams to work. But don't forget these values and principles. And actually, I would suggest starting there with those conversations about what these values and principles mean. Now with that, I hope this helps. I hope this doesn't confuse things more. This is a debate that's gone on for way too long in my mind, but then again, maybe it just needs to continue, and maybe it's the debate that gets us closer and closer to our own understanding of what Agile means. I wish you the best. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Please like, add a comment. Tell me about what you think Agile means. I'd love to hear what other people have or have thought of, or how they've expressed this in the past. Thank you.